Animal diversity, vertebrates. Intro to vertebrates, fish and amphibians. Studies suggest that the most ancient chordates were related to the ancestors of echinoderms. Today, we recognize chordates, or animals with backbones, as the ones we keep for our pets, or animals that we find in zoos, or those that slither, bite, or even fly. But between all the organisms on Earth, fewer than 5% of animal species are chordates. All chordates exhibit 4 characteristics during at least one stage of their life: a dorsal hollow nerve cord, a notochord, a tail that extends beyond the anus, and pharyngeal pouches, which are like slits in the throat area. Most chordates develop a backbone or a vertebral column constructed of bones called vertebrae. The vertebrae, along with the endoskeleton, supports the body, protects organs, and gives muscles a place to attach. Chordates with backbones are called vertebrates, and vertebrates include fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Now, I did say that most chordates develop a backbone, but there are 2 chordate groups that lack both backbones and are considered non-vertebrate chordates. These are tunicates, which look more like sponges than like us, and lancelets, which are small fish-like creatures that live on the ocean bottom. While in their fully developed form, they have neither a notochord nor tail, their larval form have all the key chordate characteristics. Now, a characteristic that differs among the major groups of vertebrates is the way they control their body temperature. Fish, amphibians, and reptiles have body temperatures that are very close to the temperature of their environment, making them ectotherms. An ectotherm is an animal whose body does not produce much internal heat. The body temperature of ectotherms change depending on the temperature of the environment. Many times, ectotherms are referred to as cold-blooded. However, this term is sometimes misleading because their blood is often quite warm. Now, in contrast, birds and mammals have a stable body temperature that is much warmer than their environment. These are called endotherms, and endotherms are animals whose body regulates its own temperature by controlling the internal heat it produces. The body temperature of endotherms do not change much even when the temperature of the environment changes. Endotherms are often referred to as warm-blooded and have other adaptations such as sweat glands, fur, and feathers for maintaining their body temperature. Now, because endotherms can keep their body temperature stable, they can live in a greater variety of environments than ectotherms can. Fish are vertebrates that live in water and use their fins to move. They are ectotherms who obtain oxygen through their gills, and most have scales. Fish are the largest group of vertebrates and have been on Earth longer than any other kind of vertebrate. They are organized into 3 main groups based on the structures of their mouths and the types of skeletons they have. The major groups of fish are cartilaginous fish, jawless fish, and bony fish. The cartilaginous fish have jaws and scales and skeletons made of cartilage. Now, this is a much softer tissue than bone. Cartilaginous fish include sharks, rays, and skates. Now, many sharks cannot pump water over their gills like most fish, so they have to rely on continuous swimming or currents to keep their water moving across their gills. You may also notice that stingrays and skates also have small holes located behind their eyes. Well, this is because they spend a lot of time partially buried in the sand on the ocean floor, so this is an adaptation of this group that allows them to take in water while buried. Now, the group jawless fish have neither jaws nor scales and have mouths containing structures for scraping, stabbing, and sucking their food. This group exists of hagfishes and lampreys, and just like the cartilaginous fish, their skeletons are made of cartilage. Hagfish are scavengers, and they crawl inside dead or dying fish to scrape and eat decaying tissue. Lampreys, on the other hand, are parasites, and they feed by attaching their mouths to healthy fish and then sucking the blood of their victims. Now, bony fish are the most familiar kinds of fish, and they include ones that you're familiar with, of course, like trout and goldfish and tuna. Now, characteristics of bony fish include jaws, scales, a pocket on each side of the head that has gills, and a skeleton made of bones. Now, another unique characteristic of bony fish is an organ called a swim bladder. This organ is a gas-filled sac that helps the fish stay stable at different depths in the water. Gas levels in the swim bladder are adjusted after the fish reaches its desired depth, so they don't have to use a lot of energy to stay at that depth. Now, bony fish, even though we talked about trout and goldfish, ones that you're familiar with, they also include some more diverse species such as pufferfish, seahorses, and eels. Let's talk about another group of ectothermic vertebrates, the amphibians. Now, the word amphibian means double life, and this is because after beginning their lives in water, most amphibians spend their adulthood on land only to return to the water to reproduce. Now, amphibians include salamanders, frogs, and toads. The larvae of most amphibians grow and eventually undergo metamorphosis. So, for example, during the life cycle of a frog's body will undergo a series of dramatic changes. So let's start at the beginning. When eggs are fertilized and they hatch, we have swimming tadpoles. And these swimming tadpoles have well-developed hind legs. Eventually, the front legs will develop, and then the tail is absorbed. And when this development is complete, you have an adult frog who is now able to reproduce. Now, they also have awesome adaptations because once an amphibian becomes an adult and moves onto land, its survival needs change, and they now have to get their oxygen from the air instead of the water. They also have to realize that fins no longer help them move, and they need to use their legs. Respiratory and circulatory systems of adult amphibians are also adapted for life on land. So these changes take place during metamorphosis. So for the respiratory and circulatory system, most amphibians will lose their gills and develop lungs, which are organs of air-breathing vertebrates. And lungs help oxygen gas and carbon dioxide gas exchange between the air and the blood. Most adult amphibians have moist skin, which also allows oxygen and carbon dioxide to be exchanged. Now let's talk about movement. We know that amphibians have adaptations for movement, and while salamanders usually crawl in their environments, we know frogs and toads also have strong, powerful hind leg muscles and a skeleton that can absorb the shock of jumping and landing. Different frog species may also have little sticky pads on their toes for climbing or webbed hind feet to help them swim through the water. Now, fish and amphibian populations are declining in areas where habitats have been damaged or maybe overfishing has occurred. Poisons in the environment, such as pesticides and other chemicals, also pollute waters that amphibians and fish need to live and reproduce. So it is important to continually learn how to protect these species. Let's take a break here, and it's time for you to show what you know.